Hey guys, this is Adbukta's voice. And because my computer didn't get here before the holiday weekend, it's not going to get here for a while, and we couldn't do a video when we were doing this Lightforge, and this was not recorded live. So the audio is still here. We are still putting it on YouTube, but just so you guys know, that's why there's no video. And we will have video again after this because it will be a absolute travesty if my computer is still not back by the next weekend when it should have been here on Saturday. Okay, so hope you guys enjoy. This is Lightforge 57. Welcome to the Lightforge. This is Adwikta.
This is Merps, and I guess that's it, right? No more wings. We're done. We are settled into the Karazhan meta.
We are not settled. We are totally not settled into this meta. I am not settled. I played 5 runs this weekend. This is the Labor Day weekend. It's a holiday weekend in the U.S. for overseas listeners. And I've been playing a lot of Hearthstone because of the new meta, and it is a totally different meta. This is very not settled right now.
It really is, and I mean, my gosh, it was so apparent. You log in on Thursday, and it's just pompous thespians everywhere.
Oh my god, the pompous thespians.
Pantry spiders everywhere, and I mean in the draft because people still don't take it. But yeah, like the offering bonus is real, and we see so many class cards as well, right? Like you face Rogue turn 1, you know they're gonna have a Swashbuckler. And mages are like more like I always expect a turn 7 Firelands Portal now, so it is very Karazhan flavored now.
Yeah, and so what this means is a lot of the adjustments that we had been making on the tier list are now going to be changed again, but I'm not done with the changes yet, but look forward to that. A lot of things are moving again. I'm going to try to punch out some changes on Monday to the 0, 1, and 2 drops, just to make it align a bit more. So one thing that, like the biggest thing, besides like just seeing all the new class cards, which we'll get into, we'll get all into this whole new offering bonus, but if you haven't played in the new meta yet, what's happened is Blizzard, I think, I have no like hard proof for this, but from like talking to people and from playing a bunch of runs and from everyone else's experience, it seems like the offering bonus is triple for Karazhan. As in, where you would normally see 1 Firelands Portal, if there was no offering bonus, you would see 3 now in a draft. And this is a lot higher than what it was previously. OG had a plus 50% offering bonus. 50%, that's it. And that was like pretty noticeable, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think with something like this, it was, if it's true, right? It's very much so needed, just because we were talking about it a couple of Lightforges ago. We're like, look,
the last Lightforge, I was the one that was pushing for like a much higher offering bonus because we didn't see any like Karazhan cards, but this is over the top. We went from plus 50% for LOE, plus 50% for OG, to plus 200% for Karazhan. I think. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's not just plus 100%. Like, it's not just double. I think they tripled it.
Yeah.
2.5 at the lowest.
And this is what was necessary. Not a lot of cards this expansion because it was an adventure. So if you want the effect of Karazhan to be felt, you definitely had to do something like this. And I think it's overall like a positive. You definitely have to change up the meta.
Overfelt. They overtuned it. I remember last week you were saying like you don't want to make the offering rate like too high because then what cards happen to be in this like really tiny adventure will just set the whole meta, and I agreed with that.
Yeah,
I was the one that was like gung ho about like we need to see more Karazhan cards because I don't see any Karazhan cards.
Yeah, look, obviously, since I brought it up, I agree with that point. But I think that we also just need a shakeup, right? And I want to just play with these cards right now. Like, I'll probably change my tone in 2 weeks once I'm like, all right, I'm just tired of this. But right now, I'm like, I want the opportunity to use these cards, which if they didn't give an offering bonus or they just gave a slight offering bonus, I don't know how a Zubat would be, right? Now,
you will always know how a Zubat will be.
I always know how a Zubat is. Like, for example, I played a a run yesterday, I had two Zubats and one Menagerie Magician just because they kept on
Did
being
you have a
offered
lot
to
of
me.
dragons and murlocs?
I actually had two dragons. I had some Murlocs. I had a couple
Oh
bees.
wow.
Yeah, I know it was so it worked out really well. But
Yeah, I was about to say. Then you're set.
yeah, yeah. Um, with cars like that, it's kind of cool because I mean I think I was offered like four Zubats and I was offered three Menagerie Magicians, right? But I
Yeah.
only took two and I took one. But if only one Zubat was offered to me during the draft, depending on what it was up against, I definitely don't take it. And you definitely don't make it work, right? Because it's sort of exponential. The more of the synergy you have, the better everything becomes. So I
Yes.
do appreciate it in that aspect. But yes, like in 2 weeks, I'm like, all right, I'm really tired of druids always having turn one enchanted raven. I'm tired of babbling books everywhere. I'm tired of Firelands Portal always on turn seven. These are things which will probably get tiring.
Yeah, yeah. Fireland Portal is already tiring.
Yeah.
I mean, I did play 5 runs, so that may be why I'm a little tired of it. But it's because mages are dominant in the meta, right? We'll talk about that later as well. But yeah, I mean, if you just play, you'll know that if you're doing well, you'll start seeing mages like every other class, which is not too different from how it is in Classic back in the day, but it's very noticeable as things tilt more towards the mage. And mages have one of the strongest cards in the Karazhan meta, which is Firelands Portal. So by turn 7, they probably drawn their Firelands Portals because it's not like if your most powerful card is like a shielded mini bot, you don't always see it on turn 2. If your most powerful card is a 7 mana card, you'll almost always see it. And so every turn 7 is a Firelands Portal. And then you
Yeah.
probably see at least one more, if not two more, afterwards in the game as well.
So here's another thing to consider. We were saying that as more cards come out, and this is a common criticism, as more cards come out, it's impossible to play around anything, right?
Yeah.
The more expansions come out, the more it supports you not playing around a single thing. Because whenever you play around something, you're inevitably taking away a few plays, right? Like you're taking away a little bit from yourself and hedging. By introducing this super offering bonus, it does reward people for playing around these cards, right? Like, because if the offering bonus is huge, you should play around these specific cards because they're being offered more, and by extension, those other cards are being offered less. So
But how do you play around Firelands Portal?
you could spread out a little bit more instead of like there are ways definitely.
Eh. What really sucks is that usually to prevent Flame Strike, you get stuff with 5 health on the board on turn 7.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
you're like now playing right into the Firelands Portal. And the even worse part about Firelands Portal and all the portals is that they're RNG. So now you've totally upped the amount of RNG in the arena. When normally this deck was, I originally thought it was a pretty controlled kind of deck without that many RNG cards. But if you make the meta all mages and you give mages a RNG card where the RNG factor is a 5 mana cost minion, that's a huge swing.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Whenever there's predominantly RNG cards within the meta, and this I saw this and I don't know if it was back-to-back games in yesterday's run, but I had a run in which I faced a shaman. He turned one Spirit Claws, and in both of the games, he tried for the totem on turn 2.
And he got it.
On one game, he got it, and he just won. Like,
Yeah, right.
there's no way you can beat a 3-charge, 3-damage weapon.
Yeah.
And I was a paladin, so there was no way. Like I didn't have that Argent Lance. I couldn't remove his totem, so it was just over for me. He got way too much tempo in the beginning. So on turn 2, it basically came down to 25% chance win the game right there. And in one game he got it. The other game he totemed and he just had a Light's Justice. Essentially, a worse Light's Justice and a totem. I put something down that he couldn't remove, and then I snowballed from there, right? And instead of him snowballing off of his amazing weapon, so those.
Yeah,
are
but
the
his
things.
weapon, even as a crappy Light's Justice, is still really good.
It's still really good,
We've talked about this. I'm really high on Light's Justice right now. Like, I know I rated it like a tiny bit below the Yeti. I draft that thing right now like it's a fireball.
Sure,
Like,
but it's not like the weapon can instantaneously remove
No,
my
it's not
2
like a
drop,
super
remove
war
my
axe.
3 drop, and then
Yes.
also still have another charge to
Yes, a
take care of.
fireball is not as good as a 1.5 times fiery war axe for one less mana.
Yeah, that's pretty freaking good. So that's what I don't like, right? Especially when
Yeah.
you introduce it that early.
I mean, that's
Firelands,
an even bigger RNG swing than just
exactly.
Firelands Portal.
Yep, Firelands
But like
Portal.
I Firelands Portal, like I played one of my runs as mage. I wanted to see what all the fuss was about with mage, and I went like 7-0 before losing my first game. And part of it was just I would Firelands Portal and I would get a Doomguard, and my opponent would say spectacular or astounding,
Right.
and I would win. You know, and then he would Firelands Portal, and it would give him, like, I don't know, 4-5 or something. And then I would win. Like, it's just... it's a crappy way to play the game. It's like bombers are happening all the time, essentially. Which, it's okay in limited amounts, but it's just too much. Like, I feel like if they dialed back this offering bonus to, instead of being plus 200%, to be plus 100%, that would be, like, the right level of Karazhan. It's too much Karazhan right now for me to handle.
Right. Or what I would like for them to do, for example, when the wings were coming out, offer no bonus or a small bonus, and then when everything hits, do exactly what they're doing right now. Just like basically throw Karazhan cards at everyone, and in maybe 3 weeks, dial that back again.
No, dial it back.
Right.
Okay.
It's something that we talked about with like some of our guests who've been on the Lightforge, right?
Yeah,
Where you ask
yeah.
them, it's like, how do you spice up the arena? They're like, introduce different metas, right? Maybe
Yeah.
for this month, say next cards have increased offering bonus. You change up the flavor of the arena, and you also reward people who can adapt and analyze the meta. So there's additional strategy, right? So I think that would be pretty cool. That's probably not what they're gonna be doing, but yeah, we do run into this problem of like, okay, well, maybe it's semi fine for the Karazhan meta. What are they gonna do for the next expansion? What are they gonna do for next expansion? And when we're talking about this next year, we're just being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the Fluga Bizzle meta is just, it's so terrible. I see
Yeah.
I see Fluga Bizzle Summoner all the freaking time.
Priest class card, of course. 'Cause
Yeah.
Priest is up next.
Yeah, and like Fluga Bizzle Maelstrom is just the strongest card ever, and it just decides games on turn 3. And how can you and you know that priests always have 3 Fluga Bizzle Maelstroms in their deck. So, I can just imagine that. Okay, let's mark that
Yep.
down.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Mark down. Mark down. We'll come back to this in December when Blizzard releases the next expansion, and we'll all be cursing the name of the priest, turn 3 priest.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean, this is it's a crappy way of making Karazhan cards come out more. But it's kind of the only tool Blizzard has right now because they haven't programmed in other stuff, and I assume there's more testing and stuff in there. But it's a problem that, like, honestly, this isn't an unforeseeable problem, right? I think, like, Blizzard was just kind of resting on their laurels a little bit, like, being like, all right, it's the arena, it'll self-balance itself. Look, we're already caring, right? We already have this, like, initiative to make the warriors okay, we made the shaman okay, we're now gonna make the hunter okay, like, sure, priest will suck, we'll make them okay in the next expansion, we'll do all this, but it seems like they're always playing catch-up, right? These are, like, highly foreseeable issues that they get to it in the middle of development or something. They're like, oh crap, oh now this is a big issue, I guess we'll like put a band-aid on it to fix it, and you know, maybe in like 6 months like really fix it or something, even though this issue was very apparent from like, you know, 6 months away at least.
Yeah, it does always seem like they are behind, right? And I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt and be like, no, that's just what we see, right? The process on their end always, it's always tough to judge because you see the
Yeah.
finished product and you don't know exactly
And keep
what's
in
going on.
mind, they like their cards are all like thought out like 6 months beforehand,
Right.
Like, or 4 months beforehand. So on that side, they are definitely playing catch up. But when it comes to like something like a fundamental change in the arena to deal with both of your goals, one of which is to maintain a exciting arena that has the new cards in a certain flavor, and the other one of which is to still make a balanced arena while not limiting your card design choices for constructed. Like, that seems like something someone should have been thinking of in the last 2.5 years this game's been out.
Yeah, I don't know. Once again, it could be a resource issue, right? Maybe the team just isn't
Yeah,
big enough.
the little indie company known as Blizzard.
Yeah, well, I mean,
They have to run like 5 games. It's really way too much for them to handle.
Blizzard itself is pretty big, but it really does seem like the teams they try to keep them as lean as possible, right?
I don't know. I think that may have been true back in the day when they were making Hearthstone, but the team is really big now. Well, not really big. It's small for a big
It's
shop,
small
but
for
it's
like a
still-
triple A
Yeah.
sort of production.
Yeah, like considering how many people play Hearthstone, it's a tiny team.
Right. Like if you look at like those big
Right.
the evil
But
corporation.
on the
known as
other
EA.
hand, right. But on the other hand, if you look at it as well, they're just making a card game. Let's go look at Duelist, or let's go look at whatever other online card game there are, and their team size. Blizzard has like quadruple their size. Like
Sure.
Blizzard's Hearthstone team.
Right. But I mean, look, I've never had to upkeep anything this popular, right? So
Yeah.
I feel disingenuous, sort of like criticizing like the preparation that way. So I'll just leave it by saying that it is a little bit surprising because this is something that should have been easily anticipated.
Yeah, and regardless, we're here now, right? Like we're already in the problem area. I think this expansion marked the first expansion where we are definitely in a problem area with arena design, where you can just kind of tell that things are falling apart a little bit. And if they have to do something before the next expansion comes out, or like I'm tired of Fireland Portals already. I'm sure most people will be before the end of the month.
It definitely
and
is.
It's going to be 2 more months.
Right. So one of the problems that you had, and feel free to disagree or something. Balance is always important, but when it's also balance cutting into the fun, right?
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
Like GVG, I think if you were to poll players and say like, "Are you still having fun?" You're like, "Yeah, I'm still having fun." It's just the meta is really tough, right? Like the meta is tough, or there's a lot of RNG, or there's
a lot of RNG, and the meta's
too
tough,
snowbally.
but it's exciting. It's
exciting,
fun.
right? I like playing with these cards, and that could be an effect of just the game was a lot newer back then as well. But that's fair. Like game developers have to also take that into account, right? As time goes on, you need to spice it up with something more. But yeah, like I think if you were to poll people now, the fun factor is significantly lower. Like people are just not having fun for one reason or another, and that's I mean that's like 1, 2, and 3 on the list, right? People have to have fun with this game.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they're just Arena right now. Like I don't know, like balance wise, Arena's in. I know, like Crip made a video, and then he had like this like huge rant on his stream at some point about like just how broken Mage is, and all this stuff. And it's he showed his stats in which I think he faced Mage like more definitely
he faced them a
percentage
lot
of time that Mages offer, because Mages offered a third of the time, right?
Right. He
or
faced
something
them
like that. He faced it like 45% of the time.
Yeah, he faced them a lot, and also his rant also included the discrepancy between going first and going second, right?
Yeah. We'll leave that off for another day.
Sure.
Because we have enough to deal with on our plates. But I want to segue this, kind of using the Crip rant and go into like, look, the meta's not going to change, right? It's not like Blizzard's going to come out the next day with a patch and like fix things. That's not how Hearthstone works. That's what the Overwatch team does. That's not what the Hearthstone team does. They have a more like every couple of months we do something and then we release an expansion, right? There's like a mid-expansion patch that kind of deals with like really bad things, and then there's like the next expansion. And that's fine, but what we need to do now, in addition to think about how Blizzard may be dealing with the issue, is to just live in this meta, right? We need to play in this meta, and one of the things that is very apparent about this meta, which we called in the very beginning, right? Once we saw the cards, before we even saw the offering bonus, once we just knew that the OG meta was going away, mages were going to be on top. Mages were going to be on the best. This is going to be TGT for mages, where TGT was for paladins. I've been, if you've been listening to the Lightforge, you heard me probably first say it at like the end of June or something. Like, it was just so, and that was before we even saw any of the cards. It was just so obvious what direction the arena was going to go towards. And now we're here. We're officially in the super mage meta, the likes of which we have not seen since Classic.
Yeah, yeah. And it really is, the separation is huge now. You have mages and you have rogues as well, but I think
Sort
mages
of.
mages are clearly number one.
Yeah.
And the difference between mage and rogue, I think, is significant. And the difference
Yeah.
between
Because remember before last week, it was like, oh yeah, mage and rogue are on top, and then there's a huge gap in everything else. Well, now that you've made this offering bonus happen, and you know what the rogue has in this expansion, right? It's got like nothing. The rogue has like an
Swashbuckler.
okay card, yeah, a swashbuckler, which is an okay card, like
Right,
a good card
right.
really, and then deadly fork, which is a goodish card as well.
right, above
but it doesn't
average,
have, but it doesn't have like the super premium cards.
yeah,
And the mage has one super premium card and then one really good card. Medivh's Valet in this meta is highly underrated because one of the things no one can do in this meta is curve out on twos. Like, what we're going to do with the tier list is we're going to raise all the 2-drops again. We had risen about 8 points in anticipation of this meta because, you know, we saw it coming. But that wasn't enough. All 2-drops are getting raised by another 2 points, and good 2-drops are getting risen even more than that. Like, that's what you have to do now. When you see a 2-drop and you are like, if you're behind on your 2-drops based on like how much you're in through the draft, you definitely take a 2-drop no matter what it is. If you're like, even though if you're a little bit ahead, I'm still hesitant to not take a 2-drop because otherwise you just don't have enough 2-drops. It is so easy if you start passing up 2-drops for anything else to just like end up with less than 5 2-drops, and then you're at a significant disadvantage going into the games.
Yeah.
So Medivh's Valet, 2 mana, 2/3, has a battle cry. If you control a secret, deal 3 damage, which is whatever. But it now appears 3 times as often, and this is a class card, so it appears 6 times as often
yeah.
as compared to like a Mad Bomber or a River Croc or whatever. That's freaking huge.
It's so unfair in so many ways. Like, not only just the offering bonus, the fact that it's a 2/3, right? Which for control classes, you always want 2/3s
Yep.
over 3/2s.
Especially with the mage where you can hero power ping without sacrificing your health.
Exactly. And also, the more, because I played a mage during the past week, and I thought about it. I'm like,
Isn't it so easy to play mage now?
it really is, but more so than that, like during a draft, you always get like quite a few secrets offered because there's a
Yeah.
lot of mage secrets, right?
Yeah.
And before I'm not saying that they were, sort of a dead pick, but you usually didn't pick them.
They're definitely below par.
Right, and now with the offering bonus to Medivh's Valet, and especially because I'm seeing so many of them, I'm like, secrets are really not that bad of a pick now.
They're not. They're not, because Medivh's Valet's battle cry is if you control a secret, deal 3 damage.
You make
So
up for the
2
tempo
mana,
loss
you
right
get
away.
double a 2 damage stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
Like, it's insane. And if you just have, like, 1 or 2 secrets, even if you don't get it on turn 2, it doesn't matter. If you don't have to play the Medivh's Valet on turn 2, and you probably, like we keep saying, right, you never play your 2-drops on turn 2. Like, you're much more likely to play them after turn 2. Then in the late game, you have a card that has the card advantage size of, like, a really good 4-drop.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it will
yeah.
probably be, like, a legit 5-mana card. Deal 3 damage, put a 2/3 on the board.
Yeah, it's pretty sickening.
Yeah, like, think about Stormpike Commando, right?
Right. You get a worse body, but
But you get
more
1
damage.
extra damage. I'll take it. I take Medivh's Valet with a secret in my hand over a Stormpike Commando.
Right, and you also get secrets are really good if you can back them up with spells, right?
Yeah.
Or back them up with control so that you don't automatically lose once you play the secret. And mages have tons of clears, tons of spells. So it's a card that just works on so many levels for the mage. And I'm just really angry. I'm like, wow, you took a lot of the, sort of subpar picks and gave an offering bonus to incentivize people to pick them. Because now it's actually worth it.
Yeah.
Like you sort of slow down a little bit and then you speed it back up incredibly by getting a quote like free dark bomb out of it.
Yeah. So overall, I think the idea should be very clear in anyone's heads if you haven't like seen or come to the same. But mages are really good.
Yeah.
There's a huge gap now between mages and rogues. And I haven't played enough of Rogue in this meta, or seen enough Rogues to know if Rogue actually has a gap with the other classes. Maybe it still does, but it definitely, Rogue does not feel all that impressive. Because if you look at the Rogues class, we're not going to go over Rogue in depth today, but it's Swashbuckler and Deadly Fork, right?
Right.
Like, Deadly Fork especially is worse the more of them you see. Because you never want two Deadly Forks in a draft.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, two Deadly Forks is fine in a draft. It's just it clogs up your hand, right? Because
Your Deadly Forks eventually just become like face damage. Like, it just gets worse and worse. Swashbucklers are fine. You could have infinite Swashbucklers and you're fine. But, like, it's just not very impressive compared to the Mage.
right. So here's something I've seen with the Rogue. It relates to something I was talking with Shady Bunny before we did our co-op. It's so rogues now they're back to playing this really aggressive style, right? Because you don't have offering bonus to Shadow Strike, so you can't just like remove, because you're not offered like three Shadow Strikes.
In my Rogue, I tried to play like the pre-offering bonus kind of like way.
Yeah.
And I died because I always stabilized, but I never had. I was always below 10 health when I stabilized.
Yep.
And they were just able to like chip me away eventually,
right?
Even if it's just repeatedly pinged to the face.
And your hero power is useless by that time.
Yeah, my hero power just goes face,
right?
Because I'm like, oh no, I need to kill you immediately, or I'm going to die. And then usually I would be able to stabilize and kill them because I'm a pretty good player, but not anywhere near always. Like a quarter of the time, a third of the time, they would like top deck or remove, some reach or whatever, and I would just die, or I would misjudge my like hold area, and then I would just die. And that happens enough that it really makes it difficult to play that style and reach like 10, 11, 12 wins.
Right. So I actually got 12 wins recently with the Rogue. It had 3 Deadly Forks, and you're absolutely correct. Those Deadly Forks, those weapons just ended up going face. And what ends up happening is, because I've always liked playing aggro rogue. It's something that...
See, I'm the opposite. I love control rogue.
Right. But
control rogue is in a bad place right now.
It is. Well, you can't play. With aggro rogue, it's just about choosing the spot where you take the risk, right? Where you say, okay...
Exactly, yep.
Right. And you take that risk. And it's also why I like playing Hunter. Like, Hunters just have to take risks sooner and have to take bigger risks.
Let's talk about Hunter next. Let's talk about Hunter. I really want to talk about Hunter.
Sure. But my big point about this, I'm like, you know what? It's fun to play this way, but I'm like, every single class right now has to play like that. Except for the mage.
Okay, I'm making a more specific point though. On top of that, but going on the same vein, every single class, because you created this very small pool of cards and you made them everywhere. Every class is a defined archetype now.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You're like drafting in a really subpar manner if you try to, because what we always do is we try to like see where the draft takes us, right? Like I believe that every class can play aggressive, they can play control, they can play whatever, and they're only tilted towards certain archetypes by like a little bit, right? Like if you're Hunter, you want to be tilted towards being a little more aggressive because of your hero power. But you can definitely play a nice mid-range Hunter and be totally fine with it. But now, you look at something like Mage, right? If I'm a Mage, and I know my offering bonus to Fireland Portal is ×3, and it's a class card, so it's ×6, I am stupid if I try to build a deck that goes so fast that it's done by turn 7, right? The good part about Fireland's Portal is that it
can still go face, yeah.
So it's probably a bad example in terms of the archetype. I'll bring up a better example afterwards. But for Fireland's Portal, you definitely basically play a draft with the idea that you're going to get a certain number of Fireland Portals, like, in mind. So if I see, like, a Stormwind Champion or whatever, right? Like, I would actually value it lower than I did before, because I know I have these, like, big things that I need to slot into my hand, into my deck that's going to be better than a Stormwind Champion.
Right. Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
And so that's what so with the Rogue, you have all these Deadly Forks, which makes all of your other, because you have this limited pool of resource that is your health. So all of your other stuff, like Deadly Poisons, like Goblin Autobarbers or whatever, they're all a bit worse. And because you have so many things that can take your health, you know that those things aren't all going to use your health, and they're actually going to... The only other option to use them is to go face, which means you're even more than before pushed towards an aggressive kind of style with the Rogue, Whereas Rogue in OG, like you said before, right, it was very control-ish, especially in the early to mid game, because of Shadow Strike, right? Use Shadow Strike to get back on the board.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. Like right now, everything feels new, right? Everything
Yeah, but
feels new, but
it's not good to force classes into these archetypes. I don't want to see a rogue and be like, they're going to be aggressive or they're going to die. Rogues don't need to be aggressive or die. They have sprint. They have, like, big cards. They have, like, card draw. Like, they have stuff.
right.
It's just this meta. And you have, like, mages are actually kind of balanced right now in terms of, like, the speed. You can go fast, you can go slow. It's actually, I always said this about the mage. For a while there, like, paladins kind of took over as, like, the class everyone hated on. But mage always took more skill, I think, to play well, which is really scary because, like, everyone is playing mage now and they're all doing pretty well with it. So the really good people can play mage and do, like, actually even better, which is really not fair because you pick your spot, right? Like when to go face and when to hang out. You have all these cards, but they can do double purposes.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of that also comes down to just, play on curve. It's always been important. Right now, it's just really important, but it's not as important for mage as well. So,
Yeah.
like, if you basically, you can get away with a lot in all aspects of the game as a mage. So, a lot of people pick it, and it makes this sort of skill level with the mage that you're talking about less important, right?
Okay, so knowing that mage is the best by far, and knowing that, I think even so, on top of this is one point I want to bring up is that, like, if you have a really popular streamer like Crip saying how overpowered mage is, and he's, like, always played, like, mage and rogue primarily, even more people are going to play mage. So you have this, like, weird loop effect where mages are definitely the most powerful class, but even more than, like, in classic, like, mages are played even more now, I think, because there's a perception of mage as being dominant that's actually even more above and beyond than how dominant they actually are, right? Like,
Right.
if every class, if let's say rogue is like a 5 and paladin's like a 4, mage is probably like a 7, but Crip makes like a poster or whatever, goes on a rant, and it sounds like a mage is a 10. And so in everyone's minds, mage is a 10. And so more people who maybe may debate taking a paladin or a rogue or some other random class are now like, well, I care about my gold. Mages are a 10. This is so freaking unbalanced. I'm going to have to take mage.
Yeah.
And so you see even more mages. Like, right now, what you have to be concerned about in the Karazhan meta, if you have a deck, especially if it's looking like a good deck. Because if you're looking at a deck that you're trying to get like 3-4 wins with because it like really sucks, you don't have to concern yourself with mages. They're all doing better than that. So you're in a very different meta if you like I lost 2 games to start 2 of my runs actually over the last week. One was with you, and it was just a very different meta, right? Like after you lose 2 games, even after we got to like 5 wins, it was still like a non-mage meta.
Yeah.
Like that's where like the priests and the warlocks hang out.
Yeah, it's oh my gosh, all those relegated classes. It's so sad.
Yeah.
But yeah, another point that I think people are making is that mage, it's one thing if you have this really powerful class, but there's a counter to it, right? Like,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So if mages are everywhere in the arena and you have a good deck and you want to beat mages because you're going to see like 4 of them between like your 6th win and your 12th win,
right?
What do? What's the best class? How do you build your deck to counter a mage?
You got to play
this is
mage,
the meta,
man.
right? So that's it. The counter to mage is mage.
Right. Because okay, it used to be, for example, like in GVG, I remember us talking about it's like, okay, mages are really strong, but I think Hunter has a pretty good matchup,
Hunter,
right?
exactly.
Right. Hunter has a pretty good matchup.
Yep.
If you get a good priest deck, I'm not saying you're
Priest,
favored,
very
but
good
like,
matchup.
yeah, you're okay,
Especially
against
into
them.
the late game.
Right, and then look, mage was always like pretty strong, but at that point you could say like, oh well, paladins are super good against warriors, super good against priests, but like rogues sort of counter paladins, and like mages counter whatever. Like you sort of had this like chart.
Mages counter everything.
Yeah, now it's sort of just like mages are the most powerful. Mages counter mages.
I think there are classes that are good against even mages though. So what you have to prepare with, right? Because it's not just like, oh, mages are everywhere. Yeah, mages are everywhere, but it's not like there's less flame strikes than there was before. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
There's like actually even less flame strikes than there was before because of the increase in offering rate of all these Karazhan cards. So the effect between OG flame strikes and Karazhan flame strikes is actually really significant.
Yeah.
And so what you have to worry about is you don't worry about Medivh's Valet, right? Like you can't deal with that.
No, definitely not.
It's either a 2-drop or it's a huge ridiculous card that you still can't deal with. You can't deal with Babbling Book. There's no like trick to it. Fireland's Portal, besides like, and I'm not talking about playing around it, but just like in terms of your general game plan, right? Like when turn 7 comes, it doesn't matter what you do. The mage will swing the tempo by 2 mana at least. Because that's what a Firelands Portal swings the board by. If the Firelands Portal can kill something with 5 health.
Right.
So if you have something with 4 health, they'll swing the tempo by like, maybe like 1.5, maybe 1. They'll still swing the tempo a little bit, but that's something you can deal with. So you have to play this weird mental game where from turn 7 onwards, once you figure out like, do you have Firelands Portals? Do you have Firelands Portals? You have to be prepared to suffer a setback in tempo. Which means that the game now revolves around turn 7. So, ignoring like which classes are good at it or whatever, and this is why like priests aren't actually doing that well, even though priests are technically a counter to mages.
Right.
It's because for a priest to win, you have to hang out for the whole game, right? Like you can't just be like, oh, it's turn 7, I have to watch out for this. It's like, no, I'm playing the game until like turn 20. Like that's how I would win.
Yeah.
So Priest and Warlock. Warlock is another counter to Mage, right? Because they have way more card advantage than Mage can possibly get, and Mage lets you stay on the board.
Right.
But for both of those classes, you deal with the Mage by going long term. But what the Mage can now do is they can have huge swings on turn 7 and above that you have now no way of protecting against. It's like, it's not really a coin flip, it's a weighted coin flip towards Firelands Portal, but you have to hold on to the board while suffering multiple tempo setbacks that are almost guaranteed that your opponent will have, especially a high win mage.
Right, and
you can't deal with that as the Warlock and the Priest. You don't have the tools capable of dealing with 2 tempo setbacks every like other turn.
I mean, it almost devolves into not really. Obviously, your decision making still matters, but it's more so your deck quality if we're going down that route, and less so your decision making, because it's not as much like the mage is putting out a lot of stuff for you to interact with, right?
Yep.
The mage
the RNG of what that 5-cost minion is.
Sure.
Because if that 5-cost minion is like a normal one, they get like I think like 1.5 tempo or whatever. But if it's a bad one, they may even get like they may lose tempo or not get any extra tempo.
Right. And and this is the thing. If you're a good player, you don't want to play with RNG cards, and you don't want RNG cards played against you.
Yeah.
But Karazhan is forcing you to play more of these cards on both ends, to experience it on both ends, right? Opponents are going to play more RNG cards against you. You have to play RNG cards in order to win as well. So it introduces this, these sort of interactions that you are not a fan of if you're an infinite player.
Only certain classes would you have to play RNG cards with.
Sure.
But yeah, like any class with a portal, basically, right?
Yeah.
Except maybe the Warrior. The Warrior's portal's kind of crappy. but the other portals are all like pretty good cards at least. But yeah, so if you were wondering why like Priest and Warlock don't work, that's exactly why. And you can take that nugget of like kind of synthesis of what the mage is doing to know what you have to do. Which is, you have to kill the mage by around turn 7. You don't have to kill him like on turn 7 because Firelands Portal is slow, right? It only has 5 immediate damage of initiative, and then it puts a minion on the board. So on turn 8, you're still hitting your opponent. And Firelands Portal spends 7 mana, and it only does 2 things, right? It puts 1 body, and it hits 1 thing. So if you can put 3 things, you're actually gaining on the mage in terms of your ability to hit the mage's face, even though the mage is like very much stabilizing in a very quick fashion.
Right.
So the way to beat mages, and this is what's crappy about Mage, because Mage has Flame Strike. It's the class most well-suited to defeating this strategy. But the way to beat Mage is to be sure you have ramped up by turn 7, maybe like by turn like 5 or 6 if possible, and then just start hitting the mage's face. Because Fireland's Portal, it's not the slowest card, but it's not a fast card either.
Right, right. It does two things, but it's
For 7 mana.
right.
So that's like playing a 3 mana card and a 4 mana card, which is highly normal, right? Like if you just play a 7 mana like one thing, that's abnormal. That's like playing one giant minion. So a Fireland's Portal doesn't actually let the mage come back immediately. It's the same, like it's the same philosophy with the mage, right? It's almost like the same as Flame Strike, right? What do you do when he Flame Strikes your board?
You reload and you try to win like that.
Yeah. So Fireland's Portal is even slower because it's not even clearing your board. It's only hitting 2 things. So if you have 3 things on the board, it's not going to kill 3 things. It's going to kill 1 thing,
right?
And then it's going to kill 1 more thing the next turn,
right?
And then it's going to kill 1 more thing the next turn.
Yeah, when you say it hits 2 things, it doesn't hit. It doesn't even hit the second target right away, right?
Yeah,
like,
you get that face damage in.
Right.
So this is what, like, I know, like, a lot of people were taking it into a meme. It's like, oh, because I think two weeks ago on the Lightforge, I kept talking about, like, yeah, you should go face. This is how the meta is going to be. Face damage is so important. With the mage being the top class and being seen everywhere, face damage is so important. Because if you just hang around and you try to trade on the board, you will lose to the mage. Unless you have a sicker deck where you're also a mage. Like, mage has effectively with Fireland's Portal and how much tempo it is in the late game, it has effectively removed Priest and Warlock from being able to keep up with it on the board. Which means that there is now no actual card advantage class that can compete with the mage.
Yep.
I guess that's not totally true, and we'll get to the one sort of semi-exception later. But your normal classes that have the most card advantage was never mage; it was priest or warlock. You just needed to set it up well, right? Especially warlock. But that's just they can't anymore. They can't because of how the mage's Fireland's Portal is working and how many of them you see.
Yep, and now you see quite a few of them, even more so than before.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So we went over rogues, sort of. We did a lot on mages because we should be focusing on mage. I want to go in a different direction now instead of saying like what the third best class is, because I think it's a little difficult to tell what the third best class is. But I want to talk about what you wanted to talk about before, which is Hunter. Where do you think Hunter is right now?
If I had to put put Hunter in a specific spot, I don't know. Like I haven't played enough with this offering bonus, but it just feels so much better.
Right?
It feels so much better. A lot cleaner. You know, you don't have the Cyclotron on 5, Bog Creeper on 6, Bog Creeper on 7, and the cards that it got are really good. You know, Cloaked Huntress is just a super solid card, and if you were able to, tempo out a Freezing Trap along with it.
Right, like remember we were saying about Medea's Valet?
Right, yeah.
Cloaked Huntress is like the more insane version of Medea's Valet.
Yeah, Cloaked Huntress is just so freaking good. Because part of the problem with traps is like, with Hunter, a lot of times it's all about tempo, right? Like, you don't really care about cards. The fact that traps don't do that much, with the exception of Freezing Trap, you don't really care significantly. It's just the fact that you have to pay 2 mana, and 2 mana you really want to spend doing a lot with 2 mana. You
especially with Hunter.
Yeah, especially with Hunter. So if you're able to just get 2 mana's worth of tempo out for free, that's game winning for Hunter. Hunter, it's a game of inches, right?
Yep.
It's always
like
about,
if you're
like you run out of cards, and then it's all about like that 2 damage that you didn't put, or did or did not put into his face on turn 3, or like that 1 extra damage that you sort of like missed out on or something, and too many games are decided on those decisions.
Yeah, and with the Hunter is you're always 100% of the time you're playing your game within the first 10 turns. Like that's where your game is at, and so it really removes the advantage of going second, which gets like an extra card. So I think the Hunter win rates for going first and going second must be absurd. Like I don't have the numbers here, but it must be like absolute absurd.
Yeah.
And that's something that works really like against the Hunters, because if you're looking at Blizzard, they're not concerned about this because they're going to look at like the average win rates, and Hunter's going to be doing actually I think quite well in this meta. But in reality, it's going to suffer a lot of inconsistency because you have a coin flip at the beginning of the game that determines a huge part of how viable the hunter is. It's a lot less of a concern with something like mage, but that's extra RNG that you don't want, right? Like, so the way we like give random penalties to, not random, but we give penalties to RNG cards below like how good they actually are on average, just because of the inconsistency. You have to knock down hunter for that inconsistency.
Yeah, yeah. And with hunters, it's just you could tell what Blizzard has been doing, or what I think they've been doing, because for the past two expansions, they've just been giving them solid curve cards, right?
Yeah, it's good. It's great for the arena.
It's great for the arena.
Cloak Huntress, Kindly Grandmother in a curve. Well, threes are always fine,
Yep.
but twos in the Kindly Grandmother. If Medivh's Valet was a key card, Kindly Grandmother. Oh my god.
Right, and in the last expansion, they gave Hunter the Fiery Bat and also Carrion Grub, right? Which, although
Yep.
not premium cards, I was saying, Blizzard is looking out for their curve. And they're definitely looking out for their curve in this expansion, by giving them a 2 and a 3 as well.
Yep.
So it seems as though Blizzard realizes, okay, here's what Hunter has to do to not just be absolutely
Die.
terrible, like just
Yep.
not pickable. Even though it's still at the bottom, like it's able to
Yep.
do some stuff. So it seems like Blizzard is aware of this, and I mean, I don't know.
This
though.
was always going to be the hunter and the mage meta, right? Like, because it was Karazhan and it's Medivh, it's going to be mage,
Right.
and because it was either priest or hunter that needed the boost, it was going to be one of the two. And when we saw the cards, it was very clear, especially that they actually had Purify as a card back then, that it was going to be Hunter. And these are great cards. Cloaked Huntress, you have a 3/4. How great are 3/4s for 3 mana? They're great. And then your secrets are free. Not even like Battle Cry, put your secrets out for free. Your secrets are always free as long as there's things on the board. Like, it's ridiculous. And whenever you have your secrets in the game, it also makes for a better draft, because you open up Mad Scientist as an option.
right.
And
Yeah.
Mad Scientist is a 2-drop.
Yeah.
So that's even better in this meta.
Yeah, with hunters, it's always about like overstated small minions and then trade it for understated big minions with an effect, right?
Yes.
So like with hunters, this is why Reckless Rocketeer is a good card. Significantly
Yes.
understated, but you get the effect.
Yeah.
Even something like a Ravenhole Assassin, right? Like you do not get the the stats that you want from it, but it has an effect that you want from it. So it's that this is the kind of stuff that you want. But with your smaller cards like Glaive Zuka, you want to be significantly overstated.
Yep.
Kindly Grandmother overstated, Cloaked Huntress. It passes the
Combo overstated.
exactly. Yeah. So it's exactly what the hunter needs. Now,
Yep.
you still shouldn't auto pick it, especially if you care about your gold. Hunter is not like, it didn't jump up to like third in the rankings or anything, but it's a lot more fun, especially because bog creepers and cyclotrons kill fun, and now you're much less
fewer
likely to see
cheats
them.
now. Fewer taunt cheats now. In
Yeah,
the meta,
definitely.
Which means hunters, and like I said, right? Like, if we're dealing with mages, the only way to deal mages now as any class is to kind of like kill them before they get too many Fireland portals out, and their Fireland portals can actually have effect, right? There's the lag time that we talked about between when they play the Firelands portal and when it really gets its good effect. I would say you have like 2 turns after they play Firelands portal before you lose the game. Like, assuming they have like 2, which is totally like normal by the time you get to like 6 wins even. Like, if you're at 6-0 or like 5-0, your opponent has 2 Fireland portals in their hand before turn 10.
This timing is important though, and just because as a hunter, like you said, you're usually going for the kill at around turn 7 or turn 8.
Exactly. The timing is perfect. It
Right.
matches up perfectly with what the mage is like at its most vulnerable, or like at the last stages before it just wins the game.
Yes, yeah.
I don't want to use the word vulnerable with mages because it's not really vulnerable at any time.
Because with aggressive decks, it's always like you win, but if you just drag out the turn, like the game by 2 more turns, you lose, right?
Yep.
It's always about you peaking a little bit before your opponent
Yes.
is able to respond, and then
Yes.
that peak is just enough. Like you see this a lot in like aggro decks and constructed, right? Where
Yep.
you win, and they've refined these decks so that like they just go in one direction, and then they refine it to a point where you just have enough damage and it's just strong enough to like burst them down. And in the arena you don't have that, but the same concept applies. So the timing matches up, but the problem is still mage just has stronger cards. So
Yeah, and you're more RNG focused because
yes.
that's how the hunter works generally, which is not good for going like high wins, which is kind of the problem, right? We look at it from the perspective of like, what's your average? And our average for all these classes are like 7 or 8 or 9, which is a problem for hunter when you start introducing more RNG just because of the class it is. But if your average is like 3 or 4, or like even 4 or 5, hunter could be really up there. Like, it's very powerful. It's held back more by its RNG than by anything else right now. I think it's very, very good for this meta.
Right.
Kindly grandmother, right? Like, you want 2s, you have 2s. You have a really good 2.
Yeah.
You're like matching the mage and beating the mage at this part of the game, which is key, because the mage is going to win every other part of the game. If you can beat the mage at any part of the game, you're in a good position as a class. And hunters, they have a zone, and their zone is exactly where the mage is predominant.
It's very true.
Okay, so that's hunter. Like, I'm really high on the hunter right now relative to where it was before, which is one of the 2 worst classes. Like, now I think it has a shot. Like, I don't want to say it's the 3rd best class, but
definitely not.
I think it's definitely like around 5th.
Maybe we'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah. And with that, I'm going to move on to... So we've established this theme, which is that if you have good 2-drops in this meta, you're at a huge advantage in consistency compared with classes without 2-drops. Mm-hmm. Because of this offering bonus, how ridiculous it is. And one of the biggest things that characterized the Karazhan meta that we saw even before this week was the total lack of 2-drops, right? Like, we didn't just go around and like raise all 2-drops on our tier list by like a ton of points for nothing. Like, we did it because you really do need to take these cards as if they are the best cards in the game. Even if a month ago you would have looked at these cards and be like, I don't really want that. I don't really need that. I can live with 4 2-drops even. You can't live with 2 4-drops. Not really. And you're not going to get more than 4 2-drops if you draft 2s at around 50, like, value.
Right.
You need to draft them way higher. And so with that in mind, we are actually out of classes with actual 2-drops. That's it. It is just the mage and the hunter. So that gives you an idea of how far ahead, like, of what the advantage is of playing hunter in this meta. Not only is it the pretty much only counter to mage, it also has that 2-drop bonus that mages also have.
Pretty good.
So I'm going to move on to one... Let's do the next class. This is the exception that I was talking about. When I was mentioning when I was talking about before, and this is the druid, because the druid doesn't really have a 2-drop, but it has enchanted raven,
right?
Which is like almost a 2-drop, right? Like, yeah, it's only a 1-drop, but it's a really good 1-drop.
It's a really good 1-drop, and if you miss your 2 with your hero power, you can kill off like 2 3s, and it might as well be like you not even playing a 1-drop, right? But
right.
You just have initiative with your 2-drop, so that's fine. Just having that, and also having, having more beast and beast synergies, and then increasing the offering bonus. Like I said, it's sort of exponential. It snowballs off of all of these synergies. So beast beast druid is in a decent spot these days.
Yeah. Yeah, Beast Druid is definitely in a good spot, especially with Menagerie Warden. Choose a friendly beast, summon a copy of it. And this is why this is the exception to the rule of you can't be mages by going big. Druids had always been a class with a lot of big cards, right?
Yeah.
Like, they hadn't gotten a lot of new ones, but they have, like, things like Ironbarks, they have Volcanic Lumberers, they have Starfires, they have these, like, huge card advantage cards that are, like, totally playable, right? It's not like Sprint. You sprint and you're like, oh, okay, I hope I don't die the next turn. They're like very easily, normally playable, huge cards, and they're good. And they are able to, at the same time, keep a curve, because curve is an issue, and Druid has always had the best curve of any class, right? If you don't consider any offering bonuses, Druids have like the most ones, the most twos, almost the most threes, right? Just like down the line.
Right.
In terms of their class cards. So when you triple the offering rate of Kindly Grandmother and Medea's Valet, I don't know that Druid can keep up, but they're really not far behind. I think they're basically, I would put them in terms of 2-drop consistency, basically at the same level as Hunter and Mage. At least that's Hunter, because Hunter didn't used to have a lot of 2-drops. Mage used to have a lot of 2-drops too. But so you have this nice curve. You're able to compete in the middle game. Token Druid exists. You can like get ahead and like push face if you need to. You have one of the few things. Like, I think of classes as being divided in a spectrum of how aggressive you are allowed to be without the deck to back it up. And that is, if you have a hero power ping,
right,
then you can be aggressive, because you can fail by like
a few
2,
damage.
3, a few damage, and you can still win like half your games just by hero powering their face repeatedly. So Druid and Rogues are kind of in that category. They're obviously not as good as Mage, which can get through taunts, and then Mage is obviously not as good as Hunter, which has double the amount of damage. And then the middle, you have Paladin, which creates a 1/1 on the board, so it's a little slow on the damage, and your opponent has more time to react to it, but it is still 1 damage every time, right? Like, you have to be on, if you're on the board, then that is 1 damage to your opponent's face every turn.
Right.
So Paladin is kind of in that middle zone, and then you have a bunch of classes that really can't do it, which is the other 4 classes. And Druid is one of the higher classes. And in this meta, where you have your best option is to kill the Mage before like turn 9, let's say. Well, you need this kind of stuff, right? Like, you need to be a Rogue, a Hunter, a Paladin, or maybe a Paladin, or a Druid. And Druid, on top of that, has all these big cards. This is where I was going with the big cards point. That I think it's one of the, like, more so than Priest and Warlock even, it can compete with the Mages in card advantage later on. Because the reason Priest and Warlock get card advantage is that they hold the board, right? During this like turn 7, 8, 9 stage. They get the board, and then they hold it, and they don't let go. Fireland's Portal prevents you from that. It prevents you from this holding onto the board concept in the late game, or it like makes it really difficult for you to do so. But if you're the Druid, and everything you're doing doesn't have all that much to do with the board, like your big card's Taunt, right? Or it's like Starfire, it has initiative, and then it draws you a card. Or it's like Menadre Warden, which you can play with like another beast later on to get all of a sudden 3 cards and like over-tempo yourself from nothing. Right?
Yeah.
Because the beast that you get doesn't have initiative or anything. Moonglade Portal is now a thing that heals yourself, so it lasts you like deeper into the late game. Like, this is a whole kit designed not so that it's good to be off the board. So it's not like Mage, but it's that middle ground, right? It's that flexible middle ground that the Druid is so well, or should be well known for, and that's better than where the Priest and the Warlock is at in this meta. Because they're at the we need to keep holding the board stage.
Yeah.
And Fireland's Portal makes the we need to keep holding the board thing either impossible or really difficult.
Yeah, that's true. I think so. I don't know. Like, the analysis, I think, sounds correct. This is something in which I'll need a bit more experience with the Druid. Because I don't, the Druid has always seemed okay on paper, and then like when I've played it for the past few expansions, I've always just been disappointed because it seems as though like this mid-range sort of game is just getting incredibly weak. You know, like
yeah. So it's not a mid-range game; it's a late game game.
Right. But you know, you're this flexibility, right, that you're talking about, or this sort of jack of all trades kind of thing. Like that ability seems to, like, you have to almost specialize these days in order to do something.
That's what I'm saying. But you can specialize as the Druid. You can't as other classes. Like, outside, like, if you're the Druid, if you have a deck that goes fast, you can still build a fast deck. If you have the deck that goes slow, you can build a slow deck. And they're both successful in this meta because of the weaknesses of the mage
Gotcha,
and how it
gotcha.
relates to the druid. I'm not saying build a mid-range druid. Mid-range druids aren't like terribly great these days, but fast druids are, and slow druids are.
Okay. All right.
On the other hand, fast and slow priest both suck, and fast and slow warlocks both also kind of suck. Not as badly, of course.
Yeah.
And, like, it's all Firelands Portal, right? Like, why was Warlock so good the last expansion? Like, yeah, they got good cards and had an offering bonus, but the cards weren't, like... Darkshire Councilman is great, but it's not, like, game-changingly amazing, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
It was just the meta. You allow, like, a Warlock to just hang out for a while, they're going to get an infinite card advantage. You're going to lose. And when you have Fireland Portals, you get the board kind of back by, like, turn 9, turn 10. And so you don't lose. And then you hit the Warlock a couple times, and they have no more cards. So I'm very high on Druid right now. I think if you ask me right now what the third best class is, I would say Druid.
Yeah, I don't know. And part of that just goes to I don't really care what the third class is. Because the difference between a third class and the fourth class is not going to be that significant. So,
That's true. I mean, it's definitely, like, Mage is pulled out so far ahead, and then Rogue is still significantly ahead. That the other classes are really kind of like,
yeah,
even if they're definitely better than another class, they're still, like, pretty close.
yeah.
Relatively.
Why are we fighting over peanuts?
Yeah.
You know, by talking about like what's for third and what's fourth when the chasm is so great.
Yeah. Okay, so we're not going to talk about Priest because it sucks. I kind of want to talk about Shaman, but we may be running out of time. We've pretty much mentioned Warlock. I'm going to just leave Warrior off to the side now. We can talk about Warrior especially later, because Warrior is now defined by Fool's Bane.
Yes,
which is
definitely
a highly interesting card, but a very peculiar card. I don't want to get into it right now. I will say that it's not like the Warriors became the best class overnight. They're also not the worst class. Like, they're somewhere in the middle, but I don't want to get too into the Warrior because we're going to run out of time on that. So I do want to talk about Paladins, because that was, like, kind of the consensus number 3 or 4 class. Where do you think they are now, and how good do you think Silvermoon Portal is now that you've seen it in action, maybe played with it?
Here's the thing with the Paladin now. They are still incredibly not flexible, right? They haven't gained any new mechanic. So whenever Paladins get a new mechanic, they immediately shoot up, right? And sorry, not a new mechanic, a way to interact with the board. So when they got Muster for Battle, right, which is a way in which they keep they get initiative and they keep the board. They rocket it up. When they get Keeper of Oldemon, which is a new way to interact with the board, right? Something that they didn't have before. They've rocketed it up. Because Paladin always has the strongest buffs in the game, right? They are the snowball class.
Yes.
So whenever they
Well,
have...
and Shaman.
Yeah, well, Shaman is sort of like... spell related, part of their sort of, if you drew like a pie chart, right, part of their effectiveness will come from like spells and playing off the board. Paladin doesn't have that. It's like, if you look at the pie chart, it is full, like 100% on the board. Like, they're on the board and then they sort of snowball off of that, and it's extremely powerful. But Paladins didn't gain anything this expansion, like a Muster or a Keeper of Oldemon. They didn't gain this other way to interact with the board, to get back on the board whatsoever. They gained the same thing that they've always done, which is buff a minion. And whether you're going, quote, all in with a Blessing of Kings or you're dividing it up with a Silvermoon Portal, it's the same old, and people know how to deal with Paladins. So I don't think that they're going to like increase at the same time. They got good cards, so.
Yeah. So the thing with Silvermoon Portal, I had a run with 3 Silvermoon Portal, so I Silvermoon Portaled a lot. And because you have to think, like, when we keep saying you need 2-drops, you need to take all these 2-drops, what we're also saying is your opponents are not taking all these 2-drops. Your opponents are missing huge parts of their curve very frequently. So it's easier to get on the board now if you have a good curve. Like, not that it was difficult in OG, and it may not be, like, easier now than it was in OG, because OG also had the same issues, which is hidden by all the taunts. But now, without all the taunts, you can exploit the fact that your opponents are not going to curve out, most likely. And especially not if they're a mage. If they're a mage, they're actually just going to kind of concede the board to you more often than not. And so the paladin is now and was able to just kind of stay on the board without that much effort. And now they have this super high offering rated Silvermoon Portal buff, which, no, it's not a great card or anything like that, but it is a buff. So it guarantees, we were talking about like locking things into archetypes, right? Like mage is a little flexible, but like rogue is kind of locked into this fast archetype. And, hunter has always been locked into a fast archetype, and it's just getting more and more so. Paladin, it was always snowball. It's snowballing so hard now. And more than that, when you're drafting, you can guarantee the snowball so long as you have your curve, right? You can't Silvermoon Portal nothing on turn 4. So when you're drafting as the paladin, you kind of just have to, like, only take 2s and 3s and 1s, even. Maybe not too many 1s, but you really have to make sure that you get onto this board. So outside of the super premium bigger cards, that's what you want. Those are the cards that you want. And Paladin has this thing again where all their good cards are 4 mana, and now they have this super offering bonus to their 4 mana card. You're going to have a lot of 4 mana cards as the Paladin once again. And the way the problem was really bad in Classic, and then it kind of got better. They kept introducing new cards in that slot, but like there's also so many other cards that the problem is less and less intense. What's back now, like with a vengeance? Because Silvermoon Portal is good enough that you'll usually want to be taking it. But it's not so great that you can't like win the game on turn 4 or anything like that. So you just have this like glut of cards on turn 4. And so with a glut of cards on turn 4, what that means is on turn 6 you can do a 4 and a 2 very well. So you can have a lot of 2 mana cards and it doesn't matter that much. Or on turn 5 you can do 4 and 1 really well. So you could have a lot of 1-drops and it doesn't matter. And on turn 7, what do you want to do? You want to do a 4 and a 3. So it's matching up in a way where because you're going to have a huge glut of 4s that you need to play somehow, you also want a huge glut of 1, 2, and 3s.
Yeah, it definitely works out. Like if you have this conditional card, which you're going to have a lot of on turn 4, you better make sure your 1, 2, and 3s are set. Otherwise, you have a useless card that you're being offered a ton of.
Yeah. So like in the next tier list update, like Shielded Minibot is going to get close to a 100.
I mean, it's just been a really good card anyways.
It's always been a really good card, but especially in this meta with the Silvermoon Portal bonus, like those are the cards that are the god cards. Not the Silvermoon Portal. The Silvermoon Portal is the what do you call it? Like the quantity card.
Right.
It is the card that you are going to have in your deck. So you have to build your deck around it. And this is what's stupid about this meta, right? Like you have to build your mage around Firelands Portal. You have to build your paladin around Silvermoon Portal.
Yep, exactly.
You have to build your druid around beasts somehow with Enchanted Raven, Menardry Warden. You have to, because you're going to see these cards so often. It like locks you into certain aspects of your archetype, and by locking you into it, it locks other parts out, so that you really do have to have a very tilted start to force you to go down the other paths, and that makes the game like less diverse and less interesting.
Indeed.
All right, we're running out of time. Do you want to talk about Shaman? Is there much to talk about for Shaman?
No, I think we can save this for next week potentially. But with Shaman, it's not much to talk about with Shaman. I think that they've been sort of like the forgotten class this expansion. The one cool card that they got was Maelstrom Portal, right? But that's a rare. Exactly. Yeah.
I played a Shaman run. I was so excited for Maelstrom Portals and Spirit Claws. I didn't get offered a single one of either.
Right, and Spirit Claws we've talked about quite a bit last week, so I don't think we need to touch upon it again.
Yeah. So, at the end, contenders for number 3, it's going to be Paladin, Druid, maybe even Hunter.
Maybe.
That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the top in the big picture, and I don't want to belabor the point of how bad Priest is, but just so in case you were wondering, yes, there is a lot of Priest of the Feast, because it is getting all of Purify's cards too, which means you see Priest of the Feast 6 times as often as you will see Shadow Word Pain or Mind Control or whatever, and you will see it 12 times as often as you will see a River Croc. Yep. That's right, 12 times as often as a neutral regular card.
So if your first pick, you got like a Stone or sorry, Broly Rockjaw Trog.
No, no,
Yeah.
no. Take a mad scientist.
Well,
I'm
okay.
not even kidding. I'm not even kidding. Like, this is what and priests don't have two drops. That was always its problems. It never had like any two drops. It had Shrinkmeister, and that's literally the only 2 mana card that it has in its entire rotation.
Well, it
That's
has
the problem.
understated two drops, right? Like the museum curators and
Okay,
everything.
that's not a two drop.
Right.
Yeah, just like actual cards that you can play on curve. So what that mean, and it was unique in that it was like the worst out of all the classes in terms of having stuff to play on turn two. And now we have a problem in which you have nothing to play on turn two. So with the priest, and you have this ridiculous bonus to one really good 4 drop. What it means is don't take any 4 drops. Like Yeti for priest, just don't take it. Like Dark Iron Dwarf is kind of a half spell, half minion. Maybe take a Dark Iron Dwarf, but like definitely don't take Yetis. Like the dumbest thing you can do as a priest when drafting is to take Yetis, like in the early draft, because you're going to get offered like 10 Priest of the Feasts, and you're going to take them because they're really good. 4 mana 3/6 that whenever you cast a spell, you can heal your hero is a very good card. It's like, first of all, either the same or probably better than a Yeti, I would say. We definitely rate it better than a Yeti on our tier list, and we'll continue to do that. So what it means is that because of the Karazhan meta, and I just wanted to like really make this point, because if you're drafting as priest, you like totally go off the rails if you don't do it this way. Don't take any 4 drops. Take every single 2 drop. Like, this is so incredibly vital when it comes to drafting priests that like I would not break this rule until pick 16. When if at that point you have like 4 2, even if you just have 3 2 drops, keep taking 2 drops. If you have 4, I would think maybe it's okay to pass up a mad scientist for like a Yeti. Maybe. Like at that point I might consider it. That's how bad it is for the priest.
Tough times, man.
Yep. Yep. But yeah, it's also like priest I think is a good example of how Karazhan is warping the class. Like it's stupid to not take any other 4 drops.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean this is a problem which we shouldn't have had this problem, but the purify thing just, although they should have anticipated purify just being a bad card anyways.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, they already said it. They said that they regret releasing Purify this expansion instead of the next one.
Yeah,
Because apparently the Priest is going to get some cards, or like neutral cards are going to come out that will work with Purify, and they wanted to like tease it, but they didn't think about the arena. Or constructed for that matter.
or constructed.
Because I think
Yeah,
the outrage was pretty equal on both sides. Okay. All right. So that's a pretty good run through of, I think, all the classes with this new thing. Like, this is big. We thought we were going to come up to this week and, like, just kind of, like, go over, like, you know, how we feel about the new meta. But that offering bonus really made things exciting. Not good, but exciting for, like, a little bit. It's going to get really tiring really soon. I can already feel it.
it's just new. Yeah,
Yeah. But it does mean you have to play everything differently.
it does, no doubt.
Okay. Well, we ran. I think I got a little carried away in some of the like, oh my god, mage discussions.
I think you
because it's
did.
really a whole new meta. I'm
But
excited about a whole new meta.
I think it was a good discussion, but I think we've exhausted sort of the topics that we've wanted to talk about.
Oh, we haven't come close to that.
Well,
You know how many hours I talk about this stuff?
I mean, like I said, we're gonna save Warrior for another time because that's really interesting, and I have a lot to say about that as well. But we'll
Okay,
save that.
we'll
For
do
another
that
time.
next week. We'll
Yep.
do that next week. All right. So for now, let's do. You know what? We were going to do. Do you want to skip card good bad or do you want to do it?
You know, I think we should just skip everything.
Okay, we're skipping everything.
Yeah,
No question
yeah.
to
No,
go
no,
down?
no, no.
All right,
It just
all
doesn't
right.
feel right after this, right?
All right, fine. It's true. It's way late.
Yeah, yeah.
In the thing to do it. All right. Okay. Well, thank you to all our Patreons, regardless. Even though we're not doing a question from the goat, we are. It's patreon.com/grinandgoat. We definitely appreciate all of your support, and I know we've been kind of all over the place this month. It's a transition period. I started a new job. Merps got sick for like a week and a half.
Also
I haven't had
moving
access
soon.
to my. Oh, you're also moving soon. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, yeah.
And we have like this wedding from our friend, so like Merps is actually not at his apartment right now, and I haven't had my computer in 2 weeks, so I'm like actually recording this from a tablet still. even though this should have come yesterday. And it's a holiday week. We've been kind of all over the place, and things will feel a lot more normal, I think, starting like the middle of... When's your move?
I'm moving next Saturday, actually.
Okay. So yeah, so starting like the middle of September, I think things will kind of get back on track, and we will actually have like list of Patreon people to thank and things like that. So thank you guys for staying with us and listening to us through the Karazhan release, and hope it was really helpful to you guys. There's a lot more coming. One of my projects I've been doing that I've already sunk 45, maybe not quite 50, at least 45 hours into it is this tier list thing, and I'm in the middle of like since Karazhan fully released, I'm in the middle of a whole redo of the whole tier list again, because the meta is entirely different again. And we will definitely have 1 drops and 2 drops updated for all the classes and the neutrals sometime over this weekend. I'm going to try to put 4 drops and 5 drops in as well. And the whole thing should be done before the end of next weekend. So we'll make a write-up and everything at the end of all that. I don't feel comfortable doing a write-up in the middle of like the tier list things. But for now, just know that like if you see a number on the tier list for a 2-drop, it's too low. You may think it seems too high, but it's too low. It needs to be higher. And on the flip side, if you see a 1-drop number, it's probably too high, and it should be lower. Because the meta is centered around Firelands Portal now, and Firelands Portal is not like so fast. Like 1-drops make you go a little faster than you actually want to with Firelands Portal.
Yep. All right. Well, anyways, look out for updated scores and tier list stuff. But I'm sure we'll give you guys an update in the next week's Lightforge.
Yep. All right. Until then, I'll see you next time. This is Adwicta.
This is Merps. Bye, guys.